And it is a very interesting rumour emerging from MGM Amazon that might mean we get actually potentially the perfect scenario for a Stargate continuation. As you can see, I might be a little bit interested in Stargate, a little bit. I quite like Star Trek as well.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.
Well, not perfect, but a close second. Perfect would be Brad Wright comes back, or Brad Wright wins the state lottery and gets billions of dollars, and then buys Stargate, and he does whatever he wants with it, and we'll go, yay, Brad! But as a close second, this is actually not a bad solution. It's maybe panning out at the moment. So what's going on? Well, we again exclusively told you a little while ago that Sony were actually in negotiations with Amazon to have a big movie TV deal. And part of that deal included Stargate. They actually produced 2 seasons, I think, of Stargate Atlantis. So they have a relationship with Stargate already. And they were interested in taking it off Amazon's hands. That would have been part of this deal, which would have basically been a IP rental type of thing. They would buy the license for 5 years or whatever, and they would produce Stargate on Amazon's behalf. But now we're hearing a little bit more. You'll remember that actually 2 years ago, almost to the day, we actually dropped exclusively that Mark Fergus was no longer involved in negotiations to produce Stargate with Amazon. We told you 8 or 9 months before that, exclusively again, that Mark Fergus was negotiating and that he had won the pitch to actually move forward with Stargate. He had been working on it for a little while already. He'd produced the Bible, which would Amazon basically used as the rule book when they were asking for pitches. They basically shared this on, this is what we want, this is the rules, this is what you can, this is what you can't do. Mark Fergus apparently produced that. We also hear from people like Jenny Stiven, which are insiders who used to work on Stargate back in the day, that actually at the end of The Expanse, Amazon sort of said, look, we'd love to continue working with you. What would you like to do, Marky? And Marky, apparently, said, I would love to do something with Stargate. Now, he negotiated with them for a fair few months after his pitch was successful and they decided to move forwards. But 2 years ago, those negotiations ended basically because Mark Fergus couldn't get an answer out of Amazon actually what they wanted. Was it a movie? Was it a series? Is it going to go on Freevee? Is it going to go on Amazon Prime? Is it going to? They couldn't get an answer. And Mark Fergus, working with Sony and his company Penguin and the Parker, were starting to work on the God of War series. Now, 3 or 4 months ago, out of the blue completely, Mark Fergus and Penguin and the Parker, with his partner Hawk Ostby, suddenly left the God of War series. A new showrunner came in Ronald D. Moore, and some new executive producers. The showrunner that was working on it as well also left at the same time. It was very unusual at the time, though, because Sony bent over backwards to say that Mark Fergus and Penguin and Parker had not been fired. It was a mutual thing, and they were just moving on to something else. And they went out of their way again to praise the scripts that have been produced for the God of War. And it's actually very likely that those scripts will actually be used in the new series. So we may still see Hawk Ostby's and Mark Fergus's name in the credits. We're hearing, actually now, that as early as last March, Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby approached Sony to say, we would actually like to do something with Amazon around Stargate. That is what triggered the conversation between Sony and Amazon. But what triggered Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby to have that conversation? Well, at around that time was when we here, Skydance, were working on something with Amazon around Stargate. We're not 100% certain whether it was a movie, a TV series or whatever, but Skydance were actually doing some development work. They pulled out in March 2024 because they were moving forward with the Paramount sale. And obviously they were like, well, we can't do both. So we want to focus on the Paramount sale. So they pulled out. Amazon let it known to Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby that if they wanted to continue development work, they'd be open to having that conversation. So they went to Sony and said, could we get out of the God of War deal? Now, Sony basically went, well, if we can manage something. It seems that around the time that they pulled out of the God of War deal and Ronald D. Moore was put in was around the time Sony started negotiating with Amazon over this bigger deal. I hear this bigger deal now has sort of boiled down to something a little bit more realistic, that it was initially like a multi-year, multi-movie, multi-TV series deal that was going to be very much like a partnership. It's now more of a let's do stuff together sort of conversation, which I think was more realistic. And I even said that at the time. I was like, I can't see this becoming this big multi-billion-dollar deal that they were talking about initially. But that's, I think, in business happens quite a lot. You know, you think big and then you actually get down to it and you'll go, let's do something that's, you know, maybe actually doable. So that seems to be where that is at the moment. Still being negotiated as far as I know. Mark Ferguson and Hawk Ostby, though, what they're looking at doing is very much a deal in line with what Secret Hideout and Alex Kurtzman did with Star Trek. That they would end up, and Penguin in the Park would end up having almost total control creatively over what happens with Stargate. Why do I think that's really, really important? I've kind of spoken to you guys about this in a couple of videos previously, but everything I'm told about Amazon is that they're really, really good when it's a TV show. They're not actually producing themselves. They just put up the money, they hire creators. You know, they go with it. Once they make a decision, they go with the team. They just write a check, and they don't really get that involved. What they're bad at is when it's a TV show, they're producing themselves, and apparently they get constantly involved, and it's death by committee. We don't want that for Stargate. We really don't want that. We want them to pick the right person and to run with it. Now, I've always championed Mark Fergus as the person I think is the right person. Not just because of what he's done in the past, but because of what I was hearing about how passionate he was about doing Stargate. What I don't want is somebody like Alex Kurtzman. Now, Alex Kurtzman was hired by Paramount and by J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot to write a Star Trek movie. He then did a few other things, and he ended up somehow managing to talk Paramount into this deal where he became the main man with Star Trek. He clearly, though, doesn't love Star Trek. He has brought in his own ideas, and he has repeatedly tried to force those ideas down our throat, like weird Klingons. He obviously isn't bothered too much about canon because he allows Star Trek to break it constantly, and then really only reacts to fans when we kick off by, you know, trying to fix things retrospectively with canon, etc. So he's not really a fan. He's a creative person. He's a businessman. He is a writer, etc., who has latched on to Star Trek as his golden cow, if that's the goose. And it's trying to squeeze as many golden eggs out of it as it can. It is goose. I don't want that. I don't want somebody to come into Stargate that just sees it as a way of progressing their career. I want it to be somebody that comes in and go, I freaking love Stargate and I think I can do something really good with it that I would want to see because I'm as big a fan as the rest of you. That seems to be Mark Fergus. And I tell you one story that I heard at the time when they were going through the Bible and they were going through negotiations over 2 years ago, in that they were in sort of like a creative meeting and they're sort of like spitballing ideas around, and somebody mentioned Stargate Universe and sort of said, like, just off the top of their head, how would we have a conclusion? And he sort of said, yeah, I think that would be really important. But then apparently he went on for about 30 minutes just ranting about the planet builders and how they were the worst, you know, that was left hanging, and they were such an interesting story idea, and he really wants to see that developed. And apparently he just told them all about the things like the furlings and stuff. And he just went on this long rant that was not prepared. That's the important thing. It was not prepared. It was an off-the-cuff comment by one of the producers or whoever it was in the room, and he just went off on one, which to me shows that he knows Stargate and would love to do it. So, is this negotiation happening? I've got to be honest with you now, guys, and say I've only heard this from a couple of sources, and it seems to be, if something is going on, it's being held very close to the chest over Amazon and Sony. It's not sort of thing they'd want to sneak out, and definitely not until a decision's been made. I would like to have heard it from more people, if I'm honest. To actually put my hand on my heart and say that, yeah, I'm confident this is happening. This is very much in the rumour category. So it does seem to make sense. It does seem to line up with lots of things, which is why I'm telling you. But I have to be honest and say, look, I've heard other rumours from other places that are maybe more consistent, that Amazon are actually putting this out to pitch again. And this is just like what they did nearly 3 years ago now. They put like this, it's called like a pitch call or something. And they just tell production companies, hey, look, we would be interested in listening to your ideas about to do a Stargate continuation. And I've heard that they're going to be doing that in the new year. The two things don't make sense to me. I don't think both things can be true, if that makes sense. So, are Mark Ferguson, Penguin and Parker negotiating with Sony, and is that negotiation far enough along that Mark Ferguson, Hulk Ostby have pulled themselves out of the God of War series to do it? I don't think they pull that trigger unless they were pretty bloody confident they were going to get it, or had already gotten it, maybe pencil agreement sort of thing, or handshake or something. Or are they pitching, or are there pitch meetings in the new year? I don't see how both are true. So, one might not be. And I think we're only going to find out in the next 6 months or so what is true. But I was told by a very good, reliable source over at MGM Plus, that actually works at MGM Plus, that we would get an answer on Stargate around Christmas time. But he said, like, a couple of months before, a couple of months after sort of thing, around this time. The winter months. So things can always go wrong, things can always go back. It's a Stargate, for God's sake. It will go wrong, it will get pushed back, but something again seems to be happening. Now, the last time I got this confident, we did get a movie, basically was planned and started, but then it got scrapped during the strikes. Let's just hope that after nearly 2 years and the studio's taken a long time to sort of get going again, that just maybe we're back up to 6 chevrons locked. Fingers crossed. Brad Wright, could he be brought in? That's for another video. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and that bell notification because it really helps us out. And you'll never miss any of our new videos. Also, you can go to patreon.com/scitrek, where most of the videos produced by the scitrek family do go first, and you get to see them without the adverts. As always, please stay safe, keep the faith. 2025, it's our year, Gators. And I'll see you next time.